Hello and welcome to Culture Vultures, the podcast where we force each others to watch, read, do whatever different pieces of pop culture. I'm Luke.
I'm Marcus.
And I'm Weston.
Today I had them read Jack in the Box by Ray Bradbury for our Halloween special. It's not the spookiest story, but it's really good, and ever since I've read it, it's like constantly on my mind, like something that's stuck with me, even though I forgot the title for the longest time.
Cool. Why'd you read it? How'd you find it originally?
Well, I'm a big fan of Ray Bradbury. Originally, it started with my sister. I think she gave me. No, that was Poe. But anyway, I picked up Fahrenheit 451 and loved it. And then I ended up picking up. Yeah, my sister gave me The Illustrated Man, and I started reading there. And Ray Bradbury is mainly a short story author, and I love him. He is a fantastic author. He's really, really good at just crafting stories, and he's the master of like the abrupt ending. And a lot of this stuff you gotta kind of read it twice, but it's really, really good. And then I found October Country in the Barnes and Nobles, I think, and then it's featured in that short story collection. So I first read it there, and then I forgot that it was an actual story, and I ended up having what was pretty much a nightmare about the story, and like it was weird because it was like spot on as to what the story was, but everything was like I was the boy in the story. So I had the nightmare that went through like the entire story as me as the main character, and it was weird. And then I woke up and was like, "What the heck was that?" Because I had forgotten the story, and then I ended up actually writing my own short story inspired by the dream that was inspired by the short story. And it's more of like a sci-fi one, but it's a lot bloodier too. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it definitely has those surreal dream vibes. I was thinking this might be like a nightmare type thing.
Oh yeah, it was really cool. I think the main reason that the story is stuck with me so much is because, as surreal and kind of abstract as it is, it really is grounded in reality. Because, like, certainly not to this extent, but I've seen people genuinely like that mother, um,
Wow.
that are like genuinely just stifle their children so much, both in the public school environment and like homeschool environment. And like I've seen people very similar to that. It happens a lot of times in single mothers. I am specifically thinking of one that I know that is a lot like that with her kid, and it's just really disturbing. And like while this story isn't exactly like super scary, to me it sticks out because it's something that like I can realistically see happening, and have seen vaguely similar things, and I know that this stuff has actually happened and does continue to happen. You hear about it every once in a while if you are into that kind of true crime stuff.
I have not read, to go back to just giving background, I have not read any Ray Bradbury. I've heard of 451, obviously, although all I really know is PewDiePie didn't like it. But, so, yeah, I haven't read any Bradbury before. This is my first one.
Neither have I.
Bradbury is like a fantastic author, and like as I said, he mainly does short stories. So like if you guys like this, you should really, really check out his other stuff. Some of it's more like sci-fi, some of it's more horror, some of it's just kind of like weird little stories and stuff. But like he's a really good author. He's a master of kind of that abstract writing where you don't really know what's going on, but at the same time you're like, I love this. And he's really good at like the whole abrupt ending thing. Like I felt like it was pretty obvious in this short story where it just kind of cuts off and doesn't carry on too much, and it leaves you with questions. But that's like how it's intended to be, and just works really, really well.
Yeah, I feel like that's short stories in general seem to have those like killer endings that are like oh bleep moments
Mhm.
where it's like it reveals something about what's going on, or it adds another question to ponder.
Yeah, I had a really hard time deciding which of his short stories to go with, because the other one that I was considering having you guys read is The Scythe, and I don't want to give too much away about it just because it's something that'll probably have you guys read later on. But it's another really, really good story. As much as I can give is, without spoiling anything, is like a man moves his family to a farm, and then stuff gets spooky. Oh, we lost Weston.
Sure.
Maybe say something.
Hello?
There we
Hello?
go.
All right. I don't know what happened there. The Discord kind of crashed.
Rip. Marcus, are you back too?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. I know you never left. It just sounded like you weren't there. So, what were your guys' impressions of the story? Because I'm really curious to see what you guys think and like what you thought, like the kind of real world ties and like what the inspiration to this was.
Well, the first impression is just kind of like, oh, that was odd. It was interesting. It's not something I would go out of my way to read, but it's like, okay, I see that. But I feel like you would have to put in a lot more effort to like get more out of it. So obviously you've got symbolism going on, some Christian symbolism, some just abstract symbolism, and just weird Matrix style stuff going on. But I'm not sure because I just read it and I just listened along to it and read it at the same time just before recording this. So
Yeah. That's what I did as well.
I don't have a concrete impression of what it's about. Just like my first impression is just that was neat.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. I think it definitely impressed me, and I won't easily forget it. But I don't really know why, and I haven't really investigated it as far as I feel like it should be investigated. I actually even listened on 1.25 speed, so I was running out
Time
of
to
time.
see some real speed.
Hey, that's not that I listened to it on 1.5, but
Oh, nice. Well, I normally don't, and it was I was running out of time. So the point was,
Mhm.
I wasn't able to investigate. I would like to read it again. I probably will read it again.
Yeah, you definitely missed out on some of the like atmosphere. Because did you use the link that I sent?
Yeah, I did. I also read along.
Yeah, he did
just
a
reading it.
pretty good job of reading it. I felt like certain points he could have done better, but the guy who performed the audiobook did pretty good. I feel like he had a good voice for it.
I feel like this would make a good like animated short.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. So when I went back through this, I caught it the first time, but it really stuck out to me the second time. So I'm trying to figure out a way to ask this without giving you guys my impressions of it to see what you thought. So basically, what I'm trying to ask you guys is like, what did you think it was about? What did you think that this symbolism was? Because like Bradbury is very much so like a painter of short stories. To each person, it's going to be different. He has an original meaning, but everybody's going to have a different impression of it. It's very much so art and artistic. So like, what did you guys get from this? What was your impression? Did you think it was just kind of like a one-off story, or like have a specific meaning, or what?
Well, a theme that I picked up on, but I'm not sure. I'm still processing what I think the implications of it are, is like death, because there's this recurring theme of if he leaves his world, he's going to die. And then at the end, he says that he's dead, but he's happy about it. And so I'm trying to tie that into some sort of philosophy that Bradbury might be promoting about, freedom. Freedom is the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
so he lives a very like captive life where he's literally, because the Jackbox is like a symbol for him.
Yeah.
So he's trapped in this world, even though he kind of has everything at his fingertips, because he can literally has like magical powers and whatnot. But he's not free because he doesn't know what's out there, and he's not allowed to leave.
Yeah.
but then when he leaves, he thinks he's dead, but he likes it. He says, "I'm glad I'm dead." So I don't know whether he has some sort of what he's trying to say with that.
You said something interesting about him not knowing, and that's what I think it's kind of about. I think it's about ignorance. That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, it's very biblical. It's very Garden of Eden sort of thing, like eating
Yeah.
from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and if you eat it, you shall.
And then you die.
You will die.
Yeah.
So
I didn't actually think about that, but that's definitely a good comparison.
Yeah, see, it's really cool because it's very multi-dimensional too. Because for me, I definitely picked up on those aspects. But the main thing that really stuck out to me, at least this time reading it, was the whole like father thing. Because it was pretty clear that like, wow, at least to me, like while there was a religious symbolism of it, it was more so just a wife's obsession with her husband. And the impression that I got from it was actually that the husband didn't die, but that rather he left her. Because, like, there's nothing really specifically to point that out, but just from the way that she behaves and the way that she talks, it's you can never leave. You can't leave. If you leave, then you're gone. You're dead to me.
yeah, there's definitely a sense in which death can be something more than just the end of life. Like it's the end of a life. My mind is just going to death so much right now in the literary sense and interpretations of it, just because of my obsession with Cowboy Bebop, which has like the recurring theme of death, dying to a previous life. So that kind of fits here as well, where it's like you're dying to the world you do, then you're entering a sort of afterlife. So you have to you kind of have to be willing to die. You have to be willing to give up your life that you know and risk it all in order to actually see reality. And that is a sort of death. It's kind of suicidal, but it's also getting a new life in a way. Or maybe I'm just high.
That's definitely how I interpret it as well. Just he's trapped. He's even more than how he's trapped by his own mother, even physically. He's trapped by the knowledge that he is kept from, which is how many people live their lives. And so when you step out of that ignorance, you also lose the bliss attached with it. And so you're kind of dying, like you were saying, like the story said as well. So I think, yeah, I agree with that for sure. I don't think you're high. Well, you might be, but
So you have to die to truly live, sort of idea, which is kind of a trope, but makes sense here, I guess.
yeah. And I think on a more superficial level, kind of like Luke was saying, with the father not actually dying but leaving, it kind of ties into how the mother is manipulating her son into staying, not because he's actually going to die, not because she has his best, or not because she has good intentions, or not because she has his best interest in mind, but because she's wanting to trap him.
And it takes her death to also free him. So there's death again. She is literally his world, because I think I picked up on that. She is also the teacher, correct?
Yes,
so
she's also
she
the
is
teacher.
literally everyone he knows. She is literally his world.
She's literally the sun, I think, is what the story compared it to, is the sun. So
like
yes.
the star, the sun.
Yes.
And so when she dies, then basically his world collapses. And he dies as well. But that's when he kind of wakes up to a whole new world, which is actually very mundane to us, because it's things like sidewalks, fences, gates, cars, plate glass windows, barber poles. But to him, it's like completely new, and he's like completely amazed and dazed by it.
Yeah.
So it's a completely new perspective on life.
Which is understandably painful for him as well. So it's not necessarily. Well, I think the story is pro that change, is in support of that, but it's not without its costs, because he did lose his world, and he thinks he's dying, or maybe he is, depending on how you interpret that.
But you can contrast him with the policeman who's observing him, who's like man, these kids are so weird with their games. But in a sense, you can kind of see how he's essentially dead to his world because that's all he knows. Whereas the boy is alive to this world because it's new to him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's weird because like it's kind of a reversal because the policeman is trapped in his own jackbox because this is the whole world that he knows.
So what does that mean for us? Are we trapped in our own jackbox?
I don't know. I haven't heard from Luke for a while, so I'm afraid he died.
What do you think of what we're saying, Luke? Does that line up with what you were thinking?
Oh, he's been gone this whole time.
He actually has been gone.
I thought that might be the case.
I've been here, but my mic apparently cut out. I was like, why do you guys keep interrupting me?
That's
pretty
sad.
funny.
Yeah, we did not hear you.
Yeah.
So we're having
whole
technological
time,
problems this episode. Like,
Yeah, I've been trying to talk this whole time, and then you guys just kept ignoring me because, like, I think the last time. Well, it wasn't that you guys just kept cutting me off because they kept trying to be like, yeah, that's good, but and then trying to say stuff.
That's so sad.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was
go ahead.
trying to say is, I like where you guys are going, and like that's definitely a huge part of the story. But one thing that I want to take it back to is kind of the more literal, real-world grounding of what the world and the universe was to him and to his mom, because I think that's a really interesting aspect that's very easy to miss with this story just because there's so much else, so much other symbolism and stuff going on that the kind of obvious thing that's right in front of your face, you just kind of look past. But the one thing that like I found really interesting about this story is like how the mother is. And like I talked a little bit about this earlier. But I think like the story of the mother is that the father left. And as kind of frequently happens, like with this, those kind of situations, especially when there's a kid involved, if the woman doesn't support herself, if the woman doesn't, take care of herself and stuff, a lot of times, like it can kind of be to where there's this, break, and this happens in men a lot too. But like there's just this mental break where then, if they didn't have their life right in their own mind, then the husband or wife that left them then becomes a god or goddess to them. And I thought it was really interesting how much that's pushed throughout the entire story. Is like the husband was God. He built the world. He built not just the world but the universe. And everything surrounding them was built by hand by him. And it was really interesting too because throughout the story she pushes on the son that you are going to be God, you are going to take over, you're going to be the man of the house. And his schooling wasn't actually schooling. It was, instead of teaching him real things, it was teaching him, you are going to be the father, you are going to be him. Because that was what she worshipped, not an actual god, but a man that she put in her own head and elevated to this status. And it seemed like she was so strongly delusional of him leaving, or if you subscribe to it, then literally dying, that she made, this beautiful mansion into a world instead of being just, a beautiful house, a beautiful mansion. And she became, what's the phrase, agoraphobic, I believe it is, where you can't go outside, and became so agoraphobic and everything. And then not only that, but because she worshipped her husband that left or died, she forced it on her son. And it was really interesting too, the fact that like she did the whole teacher thing, because you can see so much manipulation in her. And like, as I said, like I've kind of seen some people like that mom. And like there are clear patterns, and he nails every single one of them. So it makes me kind of wonder too if Bradbury himself didn't go through something somewhat similar. Like I wonder if he had a single parent, or if in his personal life he was involved or around people like that, because it's so like just right on the head, and like it's just so real, like painfully real, while at the same time the entire story is just so symbolic and abstract and out there.
So yeah, there's this theme of like a constructed reality that every individual has, because we all perceive things in our own unique way. So it's almost like we all have our own world, but some people have power over others, which they can kind of force their world onto others, especially like children and whatnot. Or that's kind of, you could see that as what cults do with their members. Is they construct a world, and the world is completely psychological, almost like you kind of compare it to like schizophrenia, but you're like forcing someone else into that world with you by preventing them from exposure to other ideas.
Yeah, and like it's crazy because like my family was friends with a single mom for a while, and like don't get me wrong, she's a nice woman, and everything, but the way that she chose to raise her son was so like similar to this, because even though she had major problems with her ex-husband, she still kind of pushed a lot of the same stuff. And like she was normally preaching like, oh, you know, your dad's, she didn't really say much about her his dad to him, but you know, it was clear that she had animosity towards him. But at the same time, there was like this weird, like almost worshiping and almost like we'll get back together thing with the dad. And it was honestly kind of disturbing to see, because like a lot of the same themes in this story, like the whole thing where the teacher goes, oh, is it because your mom's stifling you, is she not giving you enough time to yourself and everything, like that's what she did to him, because all of his time was with her, all of her time was with him, like in the real world example. And like a lot of this stuff just seems really really similar to what I personally saw there. And like I think that's why this story especially kind of disturbs me so much, because it's just too real while at the same time being this bizarre out there story, you know? Because I haven't seen it in just her either. There was a kid that I went to co-op with, and it was like this too. I think his dad was probably in the picture. I was never close to him, but the mom was just suffocating him. He literally couldn't even take off his own jacket. His mom came and did it for him because she stifled him so much and didn't teach him. And like you can really see, especially with the teacher, how the mom's manipulation comes into play, because she's smart enough to realize that she can't control him as herself all the time, that she has to have a third party in there to be a sounding board, but she's going to come in and, you know, control what that third party is saying and everything. It just really stuck out to me, you know, because it's so real, like it's so realistic, and that's what really kind of creeps me out about this story.
Yeah, and like in real life, it's not even purely physical, because some people are able to create this world so well that it stays with them even when they're gone. Like, even when you're not physically with this person, you're still in the reality that they put into your mind.
Yeah, like look at the son. How he found his quote unquote like new world was by searching for the teacher, was by searching for that guide.
Yep.
You know, like
even when she's gone, he's still in the world. He's not out of the world until he chooses to leave.
Exactly.
Even when she's dead, he's still in the world that she left him.
Yeah, I think
which
that's
is
important.
her world.
Yeah, that's a good note.
Yeah, and even when he's dead and he goes through that change, he's still perceiving things as what she told him, you know? Because, you know, he
Her
goes through and
influence is
he's
all over him.
yeah, exactly. He's like, I'm dead, I'm dead.
Yeah, I think also as far as the real life comparisons, as true as what you're saying is, it's also, I mean, prevalent everywhere, really. Like Marcus said, even in like cults and stuff. But even just
Any ideology,
your job
any
or
worldview.
your political landscape, you're gonna have a lot of that. I don't know what you'd call it, but
Manipulation and brainwashing.
yeah,
Yeah, like when you leave one system of belief that dominates your life, and you start to escape that, you don't immediately connect all the pieces of the new reality you've entered into. You still have that starting point. That's all you have to compare things to. So you still kind of are trapped in that world, even though you kind of know it's wrong, or you now believe it's
Just
wrong.
like Edwin, yeah. Because even he
Yeah.
said after he'd already escaped, I'm dead, I'm dead.
Yeah, I kind of want to re-emphasize what Weston was touching on, because Marcus kind of called out more so like worldviews and like religion and stuff like that. But like I think Weston made a really good point when he said it can even be work. It doesn't even have to be like a political thing. It can be a friend group. It can be your family. It can be just you, you know? Because like, yeah, like a lot of times you see like I feel like this is kind of a weird example, but you know, like the whole incel thing.
Mhm.
A lot of that is just their personal lives, and like I've met people like that, and it's never because of the group, it's because of them, and then they find the group.
Yeah.
And like, you know, even just in your own personal life, you know, your own individual part of it, that can happen.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You could definitely indoctrinate yourself and manipulate yourself into these worlds that are just harmful.
I mean, you can't really avoid that. Like your reality, your experiences and your perception colors your reality. Like perception is reality. So you have to kind of acknowledge the fact that what you see is all you can work with, but what you see isn't all there actually is. And what you see is very often manipulated by others for good or for bad, for whatever reason.
Yeah, so there are two parts of the story that I specifically want to call out and ask you guys what you thought about. Because these are kind of the two parts of the story that either stood out to me or I just didn't really understand specifically. So, number one, before his birthday, he hears voices in the house, and he said that he's heard these before. And that really stuck out to me because, like, the mom is so strict on all of this stuff. And later in the story, he specifically says that he has the keys to the room that he hears these voices from. And it just kind of stuck out to me because, like, how is the mom, like, are these people, or is the mom putting on a record, or is it just her talking to herself? And if they are people, like, how did she get them? Like, are they servants? What are they? Who are they? And why are they? Because he specifically calls them out, saying that they must be father's Dolly-esque servants. But like, what did you guys think of that? What was your impression?
I don't know. They could just be the real world creeping in some way that's unavoidable. Like you said, other people that have to come around that she can't keep him completely sheltered from.
Yeah, we're always going to, well, for the most part, we're always going to be influenced by some outside sources. So I think that must be what it is. I don't actually remember that part. I'm trying to find it.
It's towards the end. It's like right before his mom dies, and like right before his birthday.
So how did you interpret it then?
I really, for me, I kind of go back and forth on it. Because part of me doesn't really know what it is, but part of me thinks it was just kind of Bradbury grounding it in reality, saying like, you know, there's no way she can get all the food. There's no way she can do everything. She's still going to have people involved, and she's probably manipulating them too. And like, it just kind of stuck out to me as kind of separate from the rest of the story because it was something that was very like real, whereas the rest of the story, even the realistic stuff, grounded kind of in something instead of just symbolism and philosophy. Like it just very much so stuck out from that because it was so almost like this is what it is, you can't deny it. And like it just kind of felt like that to me. So it was just kind of like stood out to me specifically because it felt, you know, like, oh, this is exactly what this is. This is, you know, a chef coming in and along with, you know, a grocery delivery boy or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you're constructing a reality, it's impossible to avoid the noise from other realities that are dissonant with that reality that will come through. So there's always going to be something that you can try to ignore or that you can try to make fit, but it's something from without of this from outside of the world that is being constructed, either by you or by the mom, obviously. So I would probably just interpret it as something that's dissonant, just voices from another reality. And that's what stimulates his curiosity. And she tries to break that by instilling fear, obviously, of like beasts that will kill people and whatnot.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting because even though he was clearly curious, it still didn't really seem like his curiosity drove him out to me, because it seemed more so like, oh, mother died, teacher's the only other person I can talk to, teacher's not here, she must be outside, I'm going outside. You know, it wasn't like he was going outside out of the curiosity that he had, because even though teacher specifically calls out and she says, oh, you know, you've gotten a taste, you're always going to want to know more, you know, he himself never really brought it up or thought about it after that.
Yeah,
So,
because she won the battle for that brief amount, but it was made pretty clear that he was very fascinated by the outside world, because there were still windows. Like, I guess her mistake was not covering the windows well enough. I don't know, because the windows were like holes in that reality, where he kind of saw the gaps and saw that there was something outside of that, and then the voices obviously led him to open the door that he wasn't supposed to open.
Yeah. Also, if we take the fact that the mother died as his old world and old ideology dying, then that kind of goes against what you were saying.
This could be a coming of age story where there's usually like an inciting moment that drives them to finally emerge as their true self. And so if you interpret it through that lens, then it's like there was always this seed of doubt left by the holes in the reality that the mother failed to patch up properly. She didn't cover the windows. She couldn't stifle all the voices coming from the real world. But what actually drove him to finally explore his own reality that he always wanted to go explore was when she finally lost her power over him by dying. So that's something that a lot of coming of age stories that happens, is there's some sort of inciting moment where there's a choice that the character has to make between their own path or the path that they've been trained to go on their whole life.
I think that's kind of I think that's an interesting way of viewing it. But if we were talking about the way we were originally talking about it, then I think she didn't gain that incentive and curiosity because she died. She died because he gained that freedom, and that's why she died. That was as a result, because she's representing his world. But I guess it really depends on which way you look at it, and I guess there's millions of ways to look at it.
So is she created by him then?
That's well, he's not actually real, and I thought I was reading it more as like a study more than an actual story. Although there's two, like, also I like the superficial aspect to it because it's an interesting story and it's impactful. But yeah, I would say that she's just a representation. She's not actually there. She's a representation of an ideology that has a hold on him. And so that dies and he gains his freedom.
Now, I'm thinking within the grounds of the story, there's an interpretation where you could say that everything actually happens the way that it's being described. Like this universe within this mansion actually exists. Or you could say that this is just a kid on his own and everything is in his mind, including the mother, who's just this idea in his head that holds everything together. And
well, it's abstract. It's not. I don't think it's either of those things. I don't think there's a boy
but it feels
who
like a
has
dream.
Honestly, like, this is coming from me, like, having read more Bradbury. Like I mentioned earlier, Bradbury isn't a writer of short stories. Bradbury is a painter of short stories. And with that, he makes it to where everything is open-ended. Because, like, his stories always end super abruptly so that your questions aren't answered. It's just a new question is revealed. And, like, I think with Bradbury, the whole charm of him and the whole art of him is the fact that some of it's grounded in reality, some of it feels like a dream, some of it feels like it's a representation, it's just a philosophy. And I don't feel like any of us are wrong in any of our views because that's just how he is. That's how he writes. And it's so well done in that because, like, for me, I feel like the mother literally died. I feel like her death was a symbolism, but I feel like everything was grounded and that the kind of like dream-like things and that the kind of like philosophical things were coming from him being a kid and having, like not only just being a kid and being young and not understanding the world, but having his perception of reality being actively stifled. I feel like all of the weird stuff that we see is kind of through his eyes as he's interpreting it through being a kid. And that actually kind of brings me to another thing that I wanted to talk about. So when he goes to each of the rooms, he describes them differently. He describes them as these. I guess a good way to kind of like a good comparison that probably everybody's going to be familiar with is he kind of describes it like a biome in Minecraft. It's not really a full world, but it's its own complete separate thing. Do you guys get what I'm pointing at there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like he kind of
Each
used.
uniquely crafted.
Yeah, and like that was kind of one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys about. Do you guys think that those descriptions of those rooms were literal? Each room does have, the sky painted on the ceiling and stuff, or do you guys think it's a bit more symbolic in like how he's perceiving it? Like there's some wallpaper up or there's a poster and he's projecting it onto everything. Like, what do you guys think?
I think it's reality perceived through the eyes of a kid.
What about you, Wesley?
I need to look at each room because I'm sure they represent different things as far as my interpretation. But I'd have to look again.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that when you're a kid, your perception of things, like if you revisit some place that you were when you were a kid, it looks so much
Completely
smaller.
different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It feels completely different, and that's because your perspective as a kid is, you're literally smaller, so everything seems larger to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have less reference points, you have less experience, so everything's kind of warped. It's like if you woke up in a new world, the world is going to look different than to someone who's already lived in the world for 18, 20, 40, 60 years,
Mm-hmm.
That's what a kid is, someone who's new to the world.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that kind of stood out to me about that was like the fact that it's not just his perception, but rather his mother's influence. The thing that really specifically tipped me off with that, or kind of like triggered that, I guess, would be he describes the courtyard when he's leaving as the room with green carpet that needs to be cut instead of swept.
Yeah. But that could just be ignorance as well.
Well, I would say no, because when he gets in the elevator, his mom doesn't explain it. She says we're flying.
Mm-hmm.
She specifically made it seem magical.
So everything that's happening, everything he perceives is based on what she tells him, because that's all he has to go on.
Yeah.
But I guess that's not any less legitimate than the way everyone grows up. Everyone, it's kind of semantics, isn't it? Like whether you're cutting it or sweeping it, like we all interpret things based on how it was explained to us when we were first learning the language, right? So basically our reality is constructed by society, and for him, society equals one person.
Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of an interesting point because I think philosophically I disagree with you there because there is definitely that is definitely a huge part of our reality and stuff. But we really do construct our reality as individual. Even with stronger influences, we still perceive things as we want to. And the thing is, we change as we go, too. Because
I would agree. In the context of the story, that's why he's drawn to the window.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of his own individuality. And it's also why he's drawn to the Jackbox.
Yeah. I thought the Jack in the Box was a really interesting thing because I didn't remember it being a part of the story. And that's why I couldn't find the story when I went back and looked for it again. So it's really interesting because it does have a lot of symbolism, but it's not something that really is that memorable, at least to me.
So the turning point, okay, let me make sure I have this right. He drops the Jack in the Box out the window before he finds his mother dead.
Correct.
So that's the actual turning point of the story.
Yes.
That's why I said that the mother dies when he changes as a result.
See,
Because
that
it's
leans me
immediately
further
after.
into she's part of she's a figment of his imagination. Because if he has that type of control, I feel like it's all in his head. Maybe she did exist, but she's already died a long time ago. Maybe he's living on his own, and now he's finally grappling, and it clicks in his mind what's going on.
I don't think so. For me personally, I viewed that more as like foreshadowing. And I feel like just because of how real some of this stuff is, I feel like it is actual happenings. And it could be kind of like you could perceive it as like him aging and everything. But like he kind of called out the fact that his mom was getting older. Like that she was, getting more anxious and stuff. Like right before she died, there was the whole thing of he came down back to the room and he saw his mom because she had run from the teacher's room down there, and he saw his mom. He saw his mom and she was like sweating terribly. She was like drenched and like looked exhausted, and he was like as if I was making her run. So to me it seemed like it was more kind of real, in that she worked herself to death trying to manipulate him, like literally worked herself to death trying to manipulate him, was the way that I perceived it, and was a real and literal person, but he perceived things differently because of her manipulation and his own naivete from being a child. So for me, like this story seems like literal as well as symbolic. And I think you guys are more towards the strictly symbolic and like strictly.
I think both layers can coexist at the same time.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think she literally does have physical control over him, but she also has a place in his mind that he's actively giving her that he decides to let go of when he drops the Jackbox.
Yeah, and I feel like that was kind of like a little bit of like foreshadowing, like, this is how it's going to go down. There's like one other big thing that I wanted to talk about. This was one thing that I don't really understand, is when his mom dies, he doesn't go and try and open the other rooms, the other of the 21 that he was supposed to open on his birthday. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, like, I can see how you could interpret that as, him abandoning that world. But it seemed really interesting to me, the fact that he didn't even mention them, that he didn't even think about that his only objective was to go forward and find the teacher. And it was just really interesting because, like, to me, for him, how curious he was, granted his curiosity was mostly directed outside, but even so, with him being kind of a curious person, it seemed kind of strange that he didn't go and open those doors, didn't even think about it, didn't even think about his future.
There's a key difference between those doors and beyond the trees. Beyond the trees, he's never allowed to go.
Mm-hmm.
With the doors, she states that you will open this on your birthday. You will open this on your next birthday. You will open this on. So that's already a path that he's on. That's not true freedom, because that's still constructed by her on a symbolic level. But also, he knows that that's all. He already has that,
Yeah, that is kind of like the one thing though that irritates me about the story, because like I really want to know what those rooms are, and I really want to see how he perceives them as well.
Well, we can make a guess based on what the rooms that she's already shown him. They're just going to be more rooms of the mansion that he interprets in a way that is constructed by her. So it's just going to be more of the same. It's not going to be real.
Yeah, but that's kind of one of the, like, how he perceives the rooms and everything is one of the most interesting parts of the story to me, because it's really cool how Bradbury lays it out, like these completely mundane things are just absolutely magical and just amazing and incredible things.
Well, he could have gone on to describe the real world like that.
He did kind of. He didn't do it from his.
But
Yeah.
then he
Well,
shifts perspective to the officer.
Yeah, exactly. But then the officer basically recounts the boy doing that.
Yeah. So we can basically guess that he's perceiving our real world the same way he would have perceived the rooms had he opened them. Except that he's a blank slate now, instead of having his mother stick a certain interpretation into his mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was so like the actual like nightmare that I had about this story, it kind of elaborated more in some areas. And when like I was having the nightmare and everything that I was perceiving was through the boy's eyes, he/me actually went and opened those rooms. And the 21st one was actually a door to the outside world. So like I thought that was kind of something interesting that my own unconscious mind added in there, because the whole thing was, he's the man of the house, he's going to be the man of the house, he is going to be God, he is going to create the world and create the universe and repair the world and the universe that it currently exists. So it just kind of seemed interesting to me, and it kind of made me wonder, like is there like a large amount of money set aside for him to go and take and everything and then make a second mansion.
That's another interesting symbolic thing that you made me think of, where when the dad leaves, he gives up his divinity, because in the real world he's only one man in society, and who knows what position he had. He could have, but in the mansion it's his. He owns it, so he is like a god. So within the world that is constructed in the mansion, the boy will eventually be God, because he will have literal control over it. But if he leaves into the real world, suddenly he's just a boy on the street, probably just an orphan now. So he gives up his divinity when he leaves this world of his mother's construction. So there was that theme in the beginning when it mentions the father, how he died and gave up his divinity when he left.
Yeah, one other like quick thing that I wanted to point out is I found it interesting how even though he abandoned the old world, like what his mom, constructed for him, and went out on his own and everything, one thing that really interests me is that while he was still very clearly under that influence, still very clearly like seeing things through that lens, he had never seen dogs before. And he came to a dog and was touching it and was happy about it, as the police officer described. And I found that kind of interesting, because I would think that, at least on some level, he would view that as the beast. He would view it as the beast, because it's something that he's never seen or perceived before.
I think at this point his self has rebelled against the reality that was imposed on him already. So he already, on a subconscious level, knows that things aren't the way he was taught.
So do you guys have any final thoughts on this short story, or do you want to give a rating for it or anything like that?
It was weird, and I enjoyed it. I'll read it again. I suggest the viewers listen to it or read it as well.
Yeah, well, they're going to be completely lost if they haven't read it.
Yes.
Have it open in front of you while you listen to the episode. It's probably
we should probably stick a little disclaimer in the front, because like I didn't want to give away spoilers, but we did. But they will still have no idea what we're talking about, even if they listen to the whole episode and then go and read it.
I think it's going to be very apparent with the podcast going forward that you're supposed to actually have seen, watched, or heard the thing that we're talking about. Otherwise, there's nothing really to talk about except maybe give a review, but we're not reviewers. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah. I think, if anything, we're closer to critics, but we aren't even really that.
Yeah, not really. We're doing more analysis than critique. And with Rango, it was the same. We were giving analysis than critique.